Been doing more and more with paralleling the little 110 welders and checking out the different ones. This latest one that we got sent to us is a ArcCaptain. They originally were wanting to send me a fancy wire feed, TIG, did everything machine, and I said, nah, I don't want that. I just want a cheapie. But I told them I wanted more than one, so they sent me two of them. Second one's still in the box right now. I'm going to do a little paralleling of, we're going to put 6 of these together. It'll be the thing we do, and that may show up before this or after, depending on how Bert wants to put it together. But somehow I just felt like opening up the boxes and comparing the structure, how well they put them together, because I've done that in the past every time I've came up with more of these. This one is the Yes welder. This was the first of the $100-ish ones that I've bought, and I don't know what the current prices are. We could say all of these are 100 to 150. I've seen them as low as 85, and I've seen them up close to 150 by the time you pay shipping. They're all 200 amp class. This one here has got two 2200 microfarad capacitors. And it's not real pretty. It has a fan, but as far as the working, that we've described that in several other videos, it works okay. It's a little bit cold to start up. It wasn't any worse than the dragsters that I have, old thermal arcs, which were the original ones I saw of this version, which when they were still making them cost a lot more than these. So not truly a fair comparison. I didn't feel like opening those up again, but those ones, when you look inside for build quality, they were made in Japan. Absolutely beautiful. I mean, they look like a Swiss watch that was soldered together. They are beautiful for the, doesn't make any difference on how well it works, but they are beautiful. They all seem to have about the same fan. The Yes welder has got a little divider here to make sure that some of it goes through the fins. The ArcCaptain has a little bit more of a divider, fins, but not quite as directed as the Vevor welder. The Vevor welder here has a complete, now that piece of plastic is going to rot away, but at least for starters, it's got the best as far as making sure that the air goes through all of the cooling fins. I haven't had overheating problems with these yet. Now, the Vevor has got 2200 microfarad capacitors also, but those ones are 4 of them, 4 2200s, which is rather surprising to me because this one, which we have welded with a little bit already, Bert was learning some stick welding and we were playing with these. And this is the ArcCaptain. And I haven't fully tested them out yet. We're going to do more testing, but so far I like it the best. But it's only got 1500 microfarad capacitors. Now it does still have 4 of them, so it's more than the Yes welder. I expected it to have the most before I opened it up, just guessing. And the reason I say that is because it has the best starting. And that's the thing that most all these 110 volt welders are bad on, is starting the arc. Really starts nice on this machine, and it impressed me with how well it worked. It was just like starting an arc with one of my big machines. So that was the thing that kind of got me back out here to compare these more. And what I told the ArcCaptain people at first was that I was going to parallel these all together, and we'll be doing that in a little bit. And since you're watching this, I might as well tell you what we're going to do. We're going to see if we can do some carbon arcing with them. Carbon arcing takes some amperage, and I'm going to see. I could throw on, actually, if I wanted to, as many as 10 of them as far as welders I got, but I'm short on extension cords. I ordered some more. They haven't got here yet. I'm tired of waiting. And yes, I'm too cheap to pay $300 a cord downtown for the ones I want. So they end up shipped in for $145. Anyway, yeah, inside. This one is the prettiest. The ArcCaptain is the prettiest inside. The Vevor, the Yes welder, is kind of ugly inside, just beauty-wise. They're all using what looks like too small bus bars going to the output, but they all work. The ArcCaptain uses aluminum, but it's a heavier piece of aluminum than the other ones that are using copper. So I would say from direct, just looking at it, I'd say the copper is probably better because it's at least 2/3 the size of the aluminum. And but again, not a real problem. They work. It does have a case over it. The air flows through everything. And that's the other thing too, where I was talking about the air. We got to look at the cases too. It's easy for me to say this one here because the case is also directing air. The air is coming out the fan. It's going to go in the face. It's going to go in through the two sides where we got the louvers. The ArcCaptain it's got louvers on one side along with the face, so it's going to pull in the face and the one side, which will help direct a little more along with that single piece there. And black. And this one, it's got the front and both sides open, except this one here where it's open is kind of a misnomer when you see they got a insulating plate on the bottom, which the insulating plate is good to make sure that you don't get a short if the board were to warp against the case. So, but I think for cooling, you'd be better off with one of the open ones and just a little more space like the other two have. And that's the Vevor that's doing that part different. Anyway, I'll bolt them back up, get this stuff wired together, pull out the other new ArcCaptain, and we'll see if should have about, oh my God, 8 times 6, because they're going to run a good solid 80 amps as far as what they'll really put out. I want to try and do it without overworking, at least for starters, what would normally be in a household current situation. Not what I can put out here, because my plugs are a little bit stronger. But you should be able to get 80 amps out with each of these. So if we had 80 times 6 is, 480, something like that. For some reason, my mind is not working as well on camera with simple math. Yeah, it's 12, 24, 480, which is good amperage. Yeah, so I'll have to go. I also pulled out some little carbon arc rod, which I've already got out, and I want to try just using 2 of these and carbon arc and see if I can just do carbon arcing with 2 of them with some smaller rod. I think we might even be able to do it with one of them in a limited capacity. And that was something too, but I'll talk more about carbon arc when I get to the carbon arc. Because I studied and did a little bit more, and although I've done it, not a lot, haven't done it seriously for over 20 years. I did a little bit about 15 years ago, but I learned a little bit more studying about it. There's more history and things about it than what I already knew. And carbon arc is not just used for cutting, but cutting is carbon arc air is what we're going to do for some cutting. Anyway, that's what they look like inside. Okay, we got our 6 welders going. We're going to try doing carbon arcing, which is where you melt metal with an arc and you blow it out with air. And I haven't done this for a long time, but it's noisy. If the air is noisy, go away. Go lay down. Go on. You don't want to be here, kiddo. And we're going to see how this works with these little welders. You'll notice that I got some of them cranked up at 85, some at 80, and that's because I know that the meters on them are not accurate. So I know the one at 80 puts out more than the others do. So, and we're just going to try this on the plate and see if it'll cut and do stuff. best, but not bad. Not bad. That's about where I figured the limit of what you could do with 20 amp breakers on these machines. We used all 6 of them. We didn't trip anybody's lights out. I'm going to turn them up just a little bit more for fun. I don't know what the meters are doing when we're running, as far as actual amperage, what they'll end up showing. Who's sharing, who's doing what. Yeah, I bet we tripped somebody. No? Oh, it's got to turn on the air. Yeah, that's right. Didn't really cut much better. I kind of think that we're maxing out our machines. But since we are doing science right now, let's just try maxing out our machines on 110 and see if we can get a little bit more cut out of them. Not too bad. A little bit more, not a lot more. Nobody tripped out. Nobody said they didn't want to play. So I'm going to give all these welders an A on carbon arcing. Not what they're meant to do, but they all get an A on carbon arcing. The 6 of them played together very well. And of course, we have lots of air here. We have lots of things to cheat with. But yeah, 110 volts each. And I'm going to try, since we're our newest ones here, our ArcCaptain, which is the latest ones we got. And I was real impressed with them for startup. One thing I noticed as I was setting this all up, though, their welding leads aren't quite as big. The welding lead itself is a little bit smaller than some of the other ones. The welding leads they give you. You can plug in the bigger ones, which is what we got going on now, but they're slightly smaller. I'm going to try taking just those 2 and see what I can do with smaller carbon arc rod. And in fact, it's easy enough to do right now. We can just do that because all we really need to do is turn the other ones off. So we got 2 of those on 110. It says 200, but I know it ain't putting that out. Let's just go down to 100. Let's try some smaller rod. And like most of these torches, this one leaks. You'll find out with a lot of carbon arc torches, the air doesn't fully shut off. And you can rotate this a little bit. With this little rod, I don't want to rotate it too much. I think I'll break it. I'd have to say you can actually do carbon arcing as a last groove out there with 110 volt welders. Now, I also know that at that setting, we are drawing over 20 amps. So I'm going to turn these down because we gauged this out earlier. When these are set at 80, it will peak out just about at 20 amps through what it puts out. Now, have I got, is that smaller? Yes, that's smaller. I'm going to drop down one more size. Because even if you're not doing a lot as far as the gouging, how deep, how hard, carbon arcing, not used so much now. What it's really great for is unwelding. Because you can see where you're directing the arc, and you can just run an anti-bead where it just melts the puddle that you welded before and pretty much just takes the weld out. If you have a weld you want to remove and disassemble something, it allows you to just cut the weld out without tearing up all the rest of it. So it's pretty handy. It's not used as much as it used to, and after I try this, I'm going to chat a little bit more about carbon arc. Again, air on time. Okay, so you can do it on that. So let's try one welder. There's the switch. Okay. Yep. Now we're down to one. We'll try it with just one at 80 amps where it would draw 20 amps. I don't have a lot of hope, but we'll try it. That's kind of what we would expect. Okay, let's imagine that we ran some 10 gauge wire and put a 30 amp breaker in it just like I got. Let's see what one of these will do by itself. It can do it, sorta. Not happy. Not happy. You wouldn't like it. But it actually wasn't too bad at the lower setting with both of them running. Let's try that a little bit again. Okay. Two machines, 80 amps each, which I think they're lying. I don't think it's 80 amps. It says 80 on the meter. I think it's putting out closer to about 85 or 90 from the way it welded. That's actually a practical machine that you can do carbon arcing with out in the field. That's surprising you can do that with two 110 welders, actually. And as there's no cold contactor here, we will turn all these off before we lay this down. Of course, I could lay it back down on the floor again. Okay, now that I don't have to yell at the mic because I can pull out my earplugs. So carbon arcing. Carbon arcing started with, and we generally call it carbon arc or carbon arc cutting. Technically it is carbon arc cutting -A, air, for air assisted. It's what we normally do. What they did years ago, and I played with a little bit of this, and it's late in the day today. I don't feel like I'd have thought about it, but I've done it before, where you use a carbon arc to actually weld with. And there's a couple different ways to do that. You see, most people are using the holders that were available from various welding companies in the 50s, 40s, and 50s, even up into the 60s. There was a Chinese company making a whole bunch of them here a little while back. They just came out for a couple months. I saw them flooding eBay, some copies of the old ones, and then they disappeared because nobody's could buy them. But those were a couple of rods that would make an arc in between them, and then you'd have a bright, hot area nearby it. Now, the advantage to that, the disadvantage is that you either burns up your electrode really quick, your carbon electrode, or it had to run AC so that it would balance the wear between them a little better. And that was normally what they'd recommend, was running AC. And like these are all DC welders. So you couldn't run these. You'd need an older transformer style 110 welder to be able to do that. And what they would do, but the advantage to that is that you can braze with it because it's a heat that's not heating up the part directly. So even though it's really hot, you can hold it away a ways and do brazing with it. And that was one of its big advantages. But previous to that, and more common with carbon arc welding, is just between the carbon and the plate. And you just make an arc here, you're just melting a puddle, same as you would for TIG or oxyacetylene, and you add extra rod in. And I did that one time to see how well it worked, and it works, but it is very bright. You noticed how the carbon arc with the air was kind of impressive and aggressive, but it's more aggressive towards you. It burnt my welding gloves. I didn't get bad sunburn from it because I was wearing a regular welding hood. And I made a couple 5, 6 inch long welds. I welded some aluminum with it too. Did a few things just to see that you can do it. One of the ones I saw that seemed to be the most, as far as an advantage to it over some other welding types, is copper. If you're welding copper, it had a little bit of an advantage because you're getting the heat there quicker, just like you will with a TIG, but you can get inexpensive welders that will add up and give you lots of amperage. You don't need an expensive big TIG like you normally do to weld copper, because the copper sucks the heat away all the time. Now, as people will mention in the comments, you also can preheat the copper, and that will help you a lot. I prefer to have a big TIG machine myself, which we have a couple of them. And that reminds me, there's one coming up on auction that ends out tomorrow, too. But I don't need a third one. I don't need to be greedy. You guys should buy it. But I'm not going to hurt other people either by telling you where it's at. And this won't be out till that's over anyway. So, yeah, that don't matter. Always shopping for auctions. I mean, I got 2 of them. I used one. I've got 2. I don't need the third one. But it's only $200 right now. You know, it's a $4,000 welder. But I see that stuff jump up by $4,000 in the last minute of bidding, too. And it's the only one that's been for sale for about 2 years anywhere. Yeah. So, yeah, somebody should get a good deal. I don't need it. The shipping's going to cost me too much if I did buy it, you know. Have another $1,000 in shipping, and the last one I bought for only $1,000 and $400 in shipping. So why do I need another one? And I don't, John. Somebody else needs it, it'll be good for them. Thermal Arc, GTSW, 400 GTSW. Very, very good welder. Of course, it's a very, very good welder if you have 3-phase 480 in your shop. If you're on a homeowner shop, if you're running single phase, forget it. It's garbage to you. It really, that's why it shines, is because what it will do on 483 phase that other machines won't do on 483 phase. If you have different voltage, it's not worth searching it out or getting it. It's got a very special reason for the right shops that fit it. They also make ones that are different input, but that's the one you see most of the time, and that's what the one that's currently for sale is 480. They had later other brands. I don't think this one will go dual voltage, but I think some of them would go multi-voltage. The other one we've got that looks the same, that's a TIG and wire feed box welder, uses the same case. It's a multi-voltage. You hook it up and it senses what voltage it wants and picks it out automatically, like the Millers do, which is where they got the technology from after they bought out Thermal Arcs, some of Thermal Arc's lines, and then they resold them. And then it went to ESOB. And they've swapped this stuff around a lot, the different lines. But anyway, what they did, yeah, getting back to the whole thing, I've been rattling around. Okay, So you're doing the carbon arc welding, and what they realized was that if you're in an overhead position, you could just take your carbon arc rod and you could just melt the metal and it'd fall down. So that's carbon arc cutting. And you can do it uphill too, because again, you heat it up and the metal falls down. When you're doing it flat, you need the air. And once they found out that the air would let them cut flat, then they pretty well went to, like we use, carbon arc with air that just blows it out, up, down, overhead, anywhere you want the sparks down your neck, you can do it, yeah. It's really good for taking stuff apart. Here I was just gouging in the plate, but it's really, really good for taking stuff apart. And it's kind of fun to play with it on 110. And we actually did it. I mean, with two little welders. We'll put the links for these. I've got links on other videos we've done before we special, but we'll put the links on there for the ArcCaptain welders. The biggest thing I was impressed with these is they're easy to start when you go with a stick rod. Bert is just learning to weld, and it was easy. Set at 80 amps on 110 volts, so that won't trip your 20 amp breaker. And he was able to start the 332 7018 rod. We're not using big rod. He was able to weld with it. And you can weld with the other ones with 332 also on a 20 amp breaker. It's just that these others, the V-bore is easier to start than the Yes welder. They all weld fairly well, but it's just this one here started better. And that's one of the big key things to a welder is getting your arc started. It was just a little bit warmer on the startup. But that also was with it adjusted. There's an adjustment for your arc start. I had the arc start cranked up to 100% on it. And I did that on the others when I tried them too. It's just they didn't help as much. We were talking about the carbon arcing did not work on 110 with one of the ArcCaptain welders, which you're really not supposed to be carbon arcing with two of them, I don't think, anyway. But it worked good. Worked good on 110. But we're going to try it now, because I just hadn't thought about that at first. We got 220 here. So now we've hooked one of them up to 220, and we will see if it will carbon arc okay. Not as happy as it was on 110 with two welders, but it did it. It was a little harder to start it. Just getting a little cold in there some of the time. Just not quite as much with one welder. The two welders at 110 was a little nicer. But yeah, cheap way to carbon arc. 119, I think, something like that. I forget. Not much, not much. However, Austin wants to do the switching on and off, reaching back there and running it. Wu-Tang.
about 3 of them off.
But what if we turn off different ones?
I did one of each brand.
Oh!
And then I started knocking off pairs.
I see. I wonder down to which two, if we can get it down to any of the two. Or if it has to be a particular two. Let me start back out at full good amperage so I can make a run at it.
These more switches are backwards compared to everything else. Ones don't seem to like it, but when you crank on the 4, it's really doing well.
Yeah.
So right now we're just on these 2 when you stop.
Yeah.
So I think these ones don't have the juice that these are carrying out.
Yeah.
You want them all on again? Start
No.
up?
Oh, if you want me to play with it some more, yeah. Or if we did enough science.
Yeah.
I forgot to put in my earplugs. I put in earplugs if we're going to do more.
Yeah.
But, okay, we don't need it. We had science.
It works. That's cool.
What I was impressed with, overall, well, just using the little rod though, but I could start up and actually do real carbon arcing with just those 2 little ones on 20 amps each. You know, so you could do that not in everybody's home, but in a well-wired home. You can do that in my house.
You can carbon arc under your sink.
Oh, yeah, that was something I didn't mention.
Oh, no.
No, not a story, not a story. We have stories too. That's
One
different.
time I was carbon arcing when I was
But
like 5.
when I first started, if you were not and you could be at a shop that might have 30 or 40 guys, but if it wasn't one of the really high-end shops that had a lot of guys, you did not have plasma cutters. So if you needed to go out here and just cut off a piece of plate, of course you can't cut it off with a torch, it was carbon arc. We actually had carbon arcs every shop had carbon arc, because it wasn't just for, like I'm talking about now, for unwelding, how it's handy. Everybody, that's why there's a lot of surplus carbon arc outfits you can buy too. But you needed to go cut off a piece of stainless steel. That was what you did. We did not have plasma. Not everybody had a big saw to be able to cut it up. You got a piece of 1-inch stainless plate out here. You need to cut a corner out of it so that you can go make a flange. It's carbon arc. It's crude, but it worked.
Could you run carbon arc off of like one of those Lincoln welders?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was the big thing that those were pipeline welders. That's the big thing after the pipeline that people used them for, because they'll run this big rod with one of those diesel. They'll peak out at 600 amps, where we're pulling close to 500 here with all of these running. but that'll run 600 amps continuous. So yeah, they'll do carbon arc real nice.
Yeah, I just got to thinking about that because it's like, if you could do that, just have your welding truck. Like you're saying, oh, I need to lob this thing off in the middle of the boonies. You just mob your truck out there and cut whatever it is off.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, most of them have plasma now. The plasma will cut stuff off too. Of course, plasma's not going to go as thick.
Yeah, that's the thing.
How thick will this go? Unlimited. You just keep going pass after pass.
Oh. Okay. Can you do that with plasma?
No.
I thought it was a little harder to do that with plasma.
No, you got a thickness, and after that you're screwed.
Can you run? A lot of these welders have generators off of them, don't they? And that's what you run your plasma on.
That's New World. That's new welders.
Well, what are you running?
Old ones have a generator function on them that will let you run your grinder or your drill.
Yeah.
But they won't run a plasma.
Really?
Yeah, grinder drill.
Yeah.
And some of them just barely run the grinder or drill.
Well, that was the one that I was around that would shock you when you touched the truck bed. That one.
The old generators on welders, they were actually field current for the welder is what they were. They weren't actually, it was a plug there where you could plug stuff in, but it was part of the wiring for the welder that you were stealing power off of. So it was DC. So you needed a grinder or a drill that would run on DC. Now, all of the old ones did, but you start getting into the 90s and some of them did not run on DC. They wouldn't. And then they came back out and a lot of them modified their stuff so that it would run on DC again. And then the next iteration of that, they had ones that put out more DC. Same voltage, it was still DC, but they'd make them with a larger, instead of just being, it was originally a field winding that was there, a field generator, a separate little generator that goes on the back of the welder to make field current for your main welding. And later on, then they'd enlarge that so that you had a little bit more, so you could run more of a grinder off of it, but it was still DC. Then the next one, they did a belt drive AC alternator. That's my orange wire feed welder has that. That's a little belt drives underneath there that run a totally separate, I think it's 4 kilowatt on that. It's not real big. And then the latest ones, they'll have the welder where whatever the power is, the windings are just set so they also can work as a generator. And if it's a 400 amp welder, it might be a 50 kilowatt generator or something. So whole different world as far, and that's in the newer ones, what they'll do a lot of times is run a separate machine. You want plasma or something, you might have a multi-process, but you also might just plug in your other welder or plasma, TIG, whatever, to the first welding machine that doubles as a generator.
So,
And then a lot of guys just start carrying generators and forget about it and run stuff that you would normally run in the shop instead of the diesel or gas-fired ones.
what year range are we talking when we get into the fancy new welders that have?
Some of that started as early as the 80s, but it wasn't common until 2000.
Okay, so
You know.
your cheap welder you're going to find at
Yeah.
the barn is not going to be that.
No, it's not. You will find it on the smaller ones that were made in the 80s. It was real common, and like the Miller Bobcat series does that. But it's only a 8 or 10 kilowatt. I mean, it's doing all it can as a generator, the same as it does as welder, but it's just not that big of a unit. To start getting it on the bigger ones, you got to go a little bit newer.